The Fitbeard. What is going on, Aaron? How you doing? How
Great,
you
man.
doing, man?
Grateful to be here, man.
I'm grateful to have you, man. You and I go back a couple of years, even though we we have we have we really actually haven't ever interacted. Even though I was at the Squire with my oldest son that you were at back,
Mhm.
I think it was 2 years ago. It was actually January 2022.
Yep.
That's when it was, and that was a pivotal experience. But yeah, it was awesome, man. But it's so good to have you here, man.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah. And why are you here? So like I put a post on Instagram at the beginning. I do this every year. I put a post on Instagram and I just say, hey, who do you want me to interview this year? Who do you want to hear from? And several people are like, interview the Fitbeard. And I was like,
Yeah.
who's the Fitbeard? And then I went to your Instagram. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Aaron. Aaron's the Fitbeard. So like, I mean, and rightfully so. You've got a beard, and I mean, you're somewhat fit, I guess, a little bit, but
Try to. Try to keep it in shape.
this wasn't always so, though. You weren't
Mm.
always fit. Like, you actually have gone through a tremendous health transformation.
Yeah, there was a season of the fat beard. I still had the beard,
Beard.
but I was about 70 pounds heavier than I am now, and so like 240 was like the heaviest 230, and yeah, just fluffy, fat, depressed, angry, frustrated, irritated, all of it.
So, growing up, were you an athlete? Were you fit, and then you kind of transformed into this fluffy
Yeah.
guy, or
I
oh, so you were? Okay.
always very fit and athletic, high metabolism. When I got into my late 20s, it was the drinking, the partying, the trying to do life my way and not wanting to listen to anybody else, really hiding. It was a season of isolating and hiding. I think that my experience of putting on the weight was like this shelter around me where other people couldn't get close. And so my intimate relationships all suffered and struggled because I was really hiding myself. Had a big old beard, rode a Harley, and it was just during a season when I wanted to keep people at a distance and ate my feelings rather than pursuing purpose. I just pursued pleasure.
What was your go-to junk food back in those days?
Donuts, bro.
Donuts.
Donuts, yeah. You know, like the gourmet donuts,
You
like
didn't
the
even hesitate.
dozen gourmet donuts. You could have them. This was right at the peak of like Postmates, and so you could have them delivered to the house like up until midnight. So I'd get stoned, drink, and then eat just a box of donuts, man.
A box.
A box, entire 12 pack. Yeah, probably like easily 6,000 calories because these are like
Yeah.
the gourmet donuts. Yeah, no shame.
I mean, that's, going to bed after a dozen donuts. I mean, like, yeah, it sounds amazing, right?
Yeah, mostly.
Oh my God. So what was the wake up call then?
Well, we were just talking about before we got on to recording. The wake up call was I looked in the mirror and I saw a man that resembled my father figure, and I grew up without a dad, and I had a lot of resentment and anger, frustration. I just saw a guy that was not taking responsibility or ownership and being the victim, and so that was a piece of it. But the other piece is on the other end of, I'd say, that Sunday morning sad and in the blues. I asked God for help. I just said, help me, because I knew I was heading in the wrong direction. And it's the craziest happenstance back when the algorithm of Instagram was just coming around, but I got hit with an ad, and it was for a book, and the book was No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover. I hadn't probably read a book since I dropped out of college, but for some reason I felt motivated to read that book. Read it, and I felt like he had been following me around, reading my mail for years, knew everything about me. I mean, all about the covert contracts, the people pleasing, the approval seeking, the chameleon attitude, the hiding, not reaching the potential, like literally everything. The entire book was a manual for my life. And I read that book, and it was like the first moment that I realized that I was actually the cause of every single problem in my life, and it was only going to be up to me if I was going to change it.
Mm. So the covert contracts and all those things, which by the way, I've had Glover on the podcast, I think 3 times now. I really I love his stuff. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing about that is when anybody ever asks me like, hey, what are a few books that completely and totally changed your life? That is one of them.
Hmm.
And the way I describe it is, if you're a man, that book will probably give you so much clarity, more clarity than you could ever ask for, but it'll also piss you off at the
Yep.
exact same time. Because exactly what you said, it's like, oh my God, are there hidden cameras in my house? Has somebody
Uh-huh.
been reading my mail? But what was it about that book? I mean, you mentioned a few things there. The 3 covert contracts and the people pleasing, the chameleon. what was the one or two things that really rang true for you the most?
Yeah. He describes this the paradigm of the nice guy as being something you learn from childhood, being primarily raised by a mother's voice, and so the mother's voice as opposed to the father's voice. And he described it as something that we've been facing for the last 100 years, since boys stopped going off into work with their fathers. There used to be a time 100 years ago, and as the tribe were set up, where the boys would learn from the fathers and grandfathers. They'd be in the field. They'd actually be alongside and pick up the subtleties of masculinity. As he described in the book, that because of the dual income households and the high divorce rate and hyper independence with our ladies now, where both people are working, that boys are being raised predominantly by women, either in the educational system or by mothers that are actively also working. And so fathers are working two jobs, or they're completely absent. And so boys are being raised by women. And so if you're being raised by a woman, you're taught the ideals, the perspectives, the values, the likes and dislikes of a woman passed on to a man. And the issue with that, as he describes in the book, is that your entire frame for interacting with women is taught to you by women. And so this is like a monkey teaching a fish how to climb a tree. There's no parallel there. Men need to learn from men. And so when I realized that that's exactly how I learned, because I was raised by a single mom, I'm an only child. My mom was the breadwinner. She worked three jobs, but she was the voice in my life, the voice inside my head that taught me to pursue, engage, and to lead in the relationships with women was broken. It was the wrong voice. And so I needed to learn from men. And when I knew that, when I saw that, and I could see the results in my life. My relationships struggled. My self-belief struggled. My ability to build relationships with other men, like on a deep, intimate, connected level, completely struggled. I didn't trust guys because I couldn't trust my dad, couldn't trust myself. So the whole paradigm just opened up my eyes.
Same. You and I were raised very similar. I'm curious though, what was your experience growing up with your dad? You mentioned absent father, but
Yeah.
I would love for you to just dive into that.
Yeah, totally. Parents got married in the Philippines. I was born in the Philippines. I think my dad mostly wanted a green card to get to the U.S. And so um, grew up in San Francisco. They got divorced when I was 5, and we moved to Arizona in my grandmother's house. And my mom raised. My dad was a deadbeat from the standpoint, didn't pay child support, wanted very little involvement in the actual child rearing, and it put a lot of pressure on my mom. And just having to work multiple jobs, raise me. She did start dating somebody else, and I'd say the next two father figures were also not great examples. Second father figure was a drug addict, actually died from an overdose. Third one was a pilot and wasn't exactly faithful for most of the marriage, and found out about that much later on. But just three examples of the type of men that I didn't want to be. And I think the belief that I developed growing up, and this is what I've had to really unpack over the last decade, is that I couldn't trust men. Men were liars, manipulators, and cheaters. Men take advantage, and they don't look out for anybody else other than themselves. And so that was the belief that I ingrained, and it was supported by my mom, because she was hurt, she was jaded, she was frustrated, she was resentful. There were these three guys that were supposed to be leaders in the household that just really took advantage of the situation. And so most of my adult life, up until about a decade ago, it was I can't trust guys and I can't trust myself.
I think you and I were actually raised in the same house.
Yeah.
We just didn't know it. So,
It's
same thing.
it's so common though, and you know this
It
inside of
is.
coaching, and your podcast. There's so many guys out there that are struggling because there's not healthy male role models in their life, and then the net effect of that, those same chains get passed on to the kids.
I agree. I agree. The whole inception of this podcast was to completely and totally do away with that, right? To break that pattern of poor behavior. I was fascinating thing. Like, so my mom was married 3 times. It was a revolving door of just toxic, abusing men who were alcoholics, and it was just constant, right? So
Yeah.
she was married 3 times, but then she dated guys in between. But I actually didn't even know my biological father growing up, and
Mm.
they were divorced when I was 1. He came into my life for a brief period of time when I was 12, and then left again. And then I ran into him as a total fluke in a Starbucks 18 years ago, and
Wow.
we've had a relationship ever since. My dad's been married for the past 46 years, I think now, to the same woman. He's got I have two younger half brothers. Very functional family. My dad was just a guy who made mistakes, and we've gotten past that. I'm curious, do you ever see or talk to your dad?
Yeah, we've established an adult relationship over the last couple of years. Um, and I believe I've done my side of the work of forgiving and working through my stuff. I still keep distance. He's got a little bit of a drinking problem, and so I keep distance there. But I'm really am trying to walk out being a good Christian and honor and respect and know him as an adult. There's a big gap. There's a big gap in getting to know somebody that has spent most of their life avoiding responsibility. But it's been an interesting journey to come to this side of not only the cross, but also of the relationship, to realize that we're all just trying to figure it out. Some of us have better tools, some of us have better surroundings and a tribe around us, but ultimately, we're all just trying to figure it out.
How did that relationship even start over again?
Restart.
Yeah, restart.
That's a good question. I haven't put a whole lot of thought into that. Text back and forth periodically, Christmas, birthdays, every year or two we'll check in with each other. And then I saw him last time was in Vegas where he lives. We had an alumni meetup for the project about 3 years ago. Went and saw him, visited him a little bit, and we've since stayed in contact. I'm due for another visit here. But yeah, it's just open and non-judgmental, no expectation. I think when I was younger, I always had an expectation. I wanted him to be the dad that I didn't have. I wanted him to answer the questions that I didn't know how to answer. I felt like I had to figure it out so much on my own, as I imagine you did too. And so I had to work through that frustration or resentment on my side first. And then I do remember last time I saw him in person about 3 years ago, I asked the questions that I needed to ask as a boy. And so I asked the questions, why weren't you around? What does responsibility mean to you? How has your life changed since having a son? And the answers that I got back were actually really surprising and made me chuckle. But he listened, he was open to receiving, and he asked me back, he said, do you like who you are now? And I said, yes, I love who I am now. I love the life that I built. And then he said, you're welcome. I said, okay. I can't argue with that. I absolutely can't argue with that. It's a little bit arrogant, but there's absolute truth in that. God gives us our misery to make it our ministry. I would not be who I am today if I didn't have the exact father figure that I had, the exact mother that I had. And so it's all a blessing.
It took me a long time to get there as well, but I view my life the same.
Hmm.
So when I talk about my childhood on other podcasts and interviews, like I always start off with, I'm going to tell you a story, but I do not, I'm not sharing this out of pity. I am grateful that it wasn't always so. I mean, like I went through like my victim
Yeah.
stuff and like, blame and all this other stuff. But then, you just get over it and you move on and you realize, well, wait a second, like how life turned out is actually not so bad. It's actually
Yeah.
pretty darn good. And it didn't come because I was silver spooned or there was things served up on a perfectly polished dish, right? It was
Yeah.
it was messy. It was abusive. It was crazy. But at the same point in time, like, and I'm sure yours is very similar. It's like, okay, well, this is not the road I want to go down,
Hmm.
and I'm going to put certain things in place. I'm gonna read books. I'm gonna do things. I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna surround myself with, you mentioned tribe a couple times. I'm gonna surround myself with the right people to
Yeah.
make sure that these things don't happen on my watch. And it's been my childhood, as crazy as it was, and yours as well, was the best blessing possible. That
Yeah.
I don't
Amen.
think life would have been as good had it been another way.
You probably wouldn't have the conviction and the passion to help and serve men if it hadn't been exactly how it was.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I want to go back to this, the nice guy thing, and raised by you sparked a memory in me that I totally forgot when I interviewed Glover about that particular piece of context within his books. Like it was this motherly voice, right?
Hmm.
And I too, for a long time, I struggled with male relationships. I didn't really know how to navigate them. Now I definitely know better. But it also really affected, I think, my relationships with women. The
100%.
people I dated, and even I would say even early in my marriage, for me. I would, I always felt like in a way, and my wife never did a thing to make, to ever influence my feelings on this, but like I would always tiptoe around, like, well, if I ask for this or whatever, am I going to be rejected? Am I going to be this or that? And then of course I was the agenda guy. Like I just put a post on Instagram this morning. I went and got her a coffee, and the me 10 years ago would be like, oh, I'm going to get her a coffee and hopefully like I'll get something in return.
Yeah.
Right.
Covert contract. Yeah.
Yeah, the covert contract. That's kind of a rookie move. But for you, how has that? And I want you to talk about kind of before this transformation and now after. But your interactions, your relationships with women. I know you're not married, but like dating and all these different things, just relationship complexities. How did this show up for you?
Yeah. The nice guy, he is approval seeking, people pleasing. So he does what he thinks others want and need instead of being authentic. And so he lacks authenticity to gain attachment. And so we all have a need for attachment. Healthy attachment is the bonding that you get from mother and son, father and son. And it helps us develop. It allows us to see full emotional range. Growing up in a household raised by my mom, the attachment was unhealthy because there wasn't a male intercession. And so my mom's emotions overshadowed my emotions. And so I had to navigate really suppressing my needs at a young age and thinking that my needs didn't matter. And so that was really the blueprint for all of my relationships. So getting into the dynamic of dating, it would be my needs are not important. I'm going to put them to the side and I'm going to do whatever I can to make my partner happy. And so I'm going to approval seek, I'm going to people please, I'm going to change who I am and not be fully authentic because the attachment is so meaningful to me. And so what ends up showing up in the relationship, in my relationships in particular, is that I wasn't being honest. I wasn't being truthful. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't really asking for the things that were important. I didn't know what was important because I wasn't in touch with my emotions because I'd spent so much time repressing and caretaking. And so one of the nice guy symptoms is caretaking. So whatever my partner needed, how can I just people please and approval seek and just make your life better at the sacrifice of self? And it becomes a very codependent dynamic. In romantic relationship, what has happened for me is that I end up being with either partners, choosing partners that mimic that same relationship I had with my mom, where I'm taking care of somebody that is not reciprocating, or I end up repressing. And then the problem with that is you've got one authentic person and one unauthentic person. There's not an actual dynamic for true intimacy and connection. So the fact that I'm 40 and single, I'd say that a lot of the decisions up to this point have been based on seeking attachment over authenticity. Having that awareness, I'm much more clear on the type of partner that I get to be in a relationship and in pursuing partners that are also supportive of that dynamic. And so the season that I'm in now in dating, it's powerful because I know who I am, what I bring, what the values are, what my needs are, what I'm interested in regards to a partner, type of relationship I want to have. They'll ask very deliberate, intentional questions, and also know that once you get in a relationship, those old behaviors, like, they don't disappear. And so to be very conscious of the fact that I default to nice guy, and what I need to do is default to authenticity and start asking the questions like, is this really what I want? Is this what I need? Does this serve the relationship? And am I pursuing for the right reasons?
Interesting. So tell me what your conversations are like with women that you date compared to what they were before.
Yeah, I'm very bold with my list. So I've created I call it the 5 by 5 by 5. So five non-negotiables, five deal breakers, and five like to haves. So
Oh,
my non-negotiables are faith first. They are pursuing a relationship with God. They've got a healthy relationship with fitness, healthy habits. There's no inappropriate relationships with other men in their dynamic. They don't have previous substance abuse issues, but I've got a list, and I treat the list the same way I would interview somebody to come into my company. And so I'm looking at roles, responsibilities, their strengths, their values, and I'm having the questions based on that rather than, man, she's really hot. She's got a great pair of legs, and I want to see what she looks like, in the morning. And so that was the previous version. The previous version, so much of my life was focused on external validation. If I can have a beautiful woman, then I am important. And so that was the covert contract, the people pleasing, and the shifting rather than being authentic. Now I know that I'm looking for a feminine woman that is serving and loving and pursuing a relationship with God, wants to put family first, not her career first, and is willing and able to do the deep work inside of coaching, therapy, counseling, and is a growth mindset. And so that's a very different conversation, especially in the world of social media and swiping and dating. So many people put their best foot forward, but when you get down to the actual brass boots of it, all right, what does your service relationship look like? How actively you're involved in your church? What is your family like? One of the questions that I ask in the dating season is, what is your relationship with your dad? And so previously, I just did a post on this, and it's not a very proud moment, but when I was in my nice guy, bad boy season, I would ask that same question, but with a very different motive. And so if they had daddy issues, they didn't respect their father, like they didn't have that, they had a lower back tattoo, not going to put anyone in a bucket, but typically that rebellious nature against the masculine discipline was going to lead to behaviors that was going to be perfect for the one night stand. And so if they didn't have a relationship with their father, if they were totally down for, short-term, like casual relationship, no basis in faith, like that would be the person I would pursue. And then inside of those relationships, it was just emptiness. On the other side, I'm actively looking. It's like, what's your relationship with your dad and father figures and brother? And like that's so much of more of an indicator, knowing my own past. Obviously, we can heal ourselves and work through it, but it is a substantial roadblock when the father's voice is not active in the household.
I 100% agree with that. You've gone through quite a transformation.
Yeah, man.
Like big time, time, man. You mentioned obviously faith and fitness. I mean, aesthetically, I mean, like, you obviously throw the weights around here and there. And that's something that I see a lot of men will put on the back burner when they become fathers, when they become husbands. And here's the thing, I don't think that they do it intentionally. No. I think that they actually do it because there's number one, there's guilt. Well, if I'm taking care of myself, then that's time that I'm not taking care of others.
Sure.
Or that's time away from my wife. That's time away from my family. The other thing too is
comfortable.
Huh?
Or they get comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, they get comfortable in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, they order some donuts like at 12 o'clock at night, 12 of them. But I think that there's this loss of like, well, self-care is selfish. And I shouldn't do that, right? My personal belief, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, I'm 48, but there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not training. I mean, I just went for my CCW class yesterday, and it was 8.5 hours long, and there was a 1 hour break, and instead of going and getting something to eat, my gym was 3 minutes away, so I went and worked out and came back, and the instructor was like, I came back sweaty. He was like, where did you go to eat? And I'm like, I went to the gym. He's like, you went to the gym? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, why? I was like, because I had an hour. And they're like, well, why did you do that? Like, it was almost like, what is wrong with you that you did that? And I was like, but there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not doing something active to take care of my fitness. And I don't think, I think the mentality is different. I think a lot of guys put that on the back burner. I'm not exactly sure why, other than the reasons we already talked about.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's this broken self-belief that you can't prioritize yourself. But the truth of the matter is, at the tip of the spear, the leader in the family, you have to put your self-care as a priority. Because if you go down, the entire family goes down. Same thing as the CEO in a company. You got to protect your time, your space, your energy, have a dialed-in morning and evening routine, because you're leading everyone else. And the example you set, you should have this mantra. I got this from Wes Watson a number of years ago, and it just stuck with me. But if I slip, they fall. And so as the father, as the leader, as the man leading others, if you slip in any domain, your faith, your fitness, your family, your finances, if you get fat and fluffy, you're setting an example for others to fall. And so you're like one little slip in a role of leadership has so many more dominoes than anybody else. And so leadership just carries more weight.
100%. Talk to me about leading from the tip of the spear like that. What is that? What is that? What do you think? I'm not talking about good. I'm talking about the best.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like?
I think it comes down to having clarity of vision first and foremost. And so knowing where you're going 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and have it crisp, clear. Living by core values. Most men don't have core values, and so they operate out of default rather than design. And core values are those things when you face that fork in the road, you decide who you want to be. Core values is not something you come up with in a weekend workshop. It's something you really need to spend some time diving deep into. So vision, core values. And the third one is victories. And so your victories are your consistent ways that you're building your confidence and your competence. So you're continuously growing. Every mountain that you climb, like the peak, when you get up there, you should realize that there's just more mountains beyond that. So I think a life of greatness, of fulfillment, is realizing it never ends until it ends, and you're always pursuing a vision that's got moving benchmarks. You're living and operating consistently every single day by core values, and you're stacking consistent victories. That's
So
what
I
I think
want.
great looks like.
I love that. That's one of the things we do in the Dad Edge is vision, core values, like the and stacking the wins, which you
Yeah.
call the victories, right? I just had a conversation with my oldest son about this, and I'm not going to get into the details out of privacy, but it really boiled down to a conversation that we had to do with like, well, I said I'm not going to do these things, or I am going to do these things,
Mm.
and then I just didn't do them because I didn't feel like it. And the conversation that I had with him was like, so like for instance, like my calendar, I live by my schedule. When I
Mhm.
have a block of time, this is when I'm training, this is when I'm working out, this is when I'm working on content, this is when I'm interviewing Erin. There's nothing else that matters, and it's already in my calendar. I am not going to say no to it. When
Yeah.
I start saying no, and there's been times in my life where I've gotten slippery with that, right? Where I'm
Yep.
like, oh, well, I've got this other thing to do, so I just won't work out. Or I got this other thing to do that I'd rather do, so I'll just cancel this podcast with Erin. And it's like the moment that I say, this is what I promised, this is what I planned, this is my word. What I've noticed in the conversation I have with my son is I'm like, look, on the days, and I'll just use this as an example, and this is what we weren't talking about, but he's now an off-season wrestler, but he's got off-season wrestling practice. And let's just say that there's a time he's like, I really don't feel like going. I was like, yeah, but you said you'd go.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know you don't feel like going, but this is actually the moment where it's even more important
Yeah.
for you to go, not for anybody, not for your coach, not for
Mhm.
your teammates, but for you, like for you, because you're going to walk out of that practice knowing you kept your promise that you made to yourself. You showed up, you did the work, regardless how you felt like it. And it's actually a more powerful experience because you did it despite your feelings.
When you didn't want to do it.
And you didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But the stacking win things, and I want to get to core values and vision too.
Mhm.
The stacking wins, I think that is the easiest promise for men to break because
Mhm.
they'll promise themselves to do something, they don't do it, and then it just becomes easier and easier and easier
Yeah.
not to do it, and then they're like, well, I haven't done it though, so just screw it all.
Yeah. Turns into the sunken cost fallacy where I'm already lost a little bit, so I'll keep on losing. Gamblers experience that, alcoholics experience that, but it's like that one slippery slope. It only takes a little bit to get us start to live in that default mode. And so everything you're describing is being a man of your word and just following through with what you said you're going to do. It's literally the greatest personal development hack of all time. Do what you said you're going to do, and you're going to live a great life.
I agree with that. Why do you think it's so easy for us to maybe just not today? Why is that?
Modeling, man.
Yeah.
Modeling. Tribe. I think it's 100% tribe. I think it's the people you choose to have in your sphere. We are the sum of the five people that we surround ourselves with. And so if you've got a knucklehead or a couple knuckleheads or a handful of knuckleheads in your group that don't live at a high capacity in life and simply aren't stretching themselves consistently, we just start to fit in with those people around us. And I think it is
Hmm.
100% based on the models we have around us. I think that's the reason why successful people, millionaires, are all surrounding themselves with other successful people who are millionaires. Fit people hang out with fit people. When I was fat, I had fluffy friends. And so literally your circle is going to determine the trajectory that you're on.
I agree with that. There was I heard a quote that if you're hanging out with five criminals, you'll be the sixth.
Yep.
If you hang out with five people who do drugs, you'll be the sixth. If you hang out with five alcoholics, you'll be the sixth.
Yep.
And that is true. You know, we are who we surround ourselves with. Talk to me more about core values.
Yeah. Um, so I think that there's a process that you need to go through to determine
I
your core
agree.
values. Your actual core values is step one. We all have things we value. And so when I was Fatbeard, I valued pleasure. I valued avoiding responsibility. I valued ease and comfort and not really having to work for things. And so if you first have to identify, just like a journey, you identify where you are. That's your first point on the map. And then you pick the next point on the map. And that's your aspiration. So the aspirational values are who you want to be based on your vision. The distance between actual and aspirational is action. And so core values become integrated into who you are when you take specific measured action. And so first, figure out what your aspirational values are, realize what your actual core values are, and start taking intentional action. So when I think about this process, there's two things I take my guys through. One is defining what your aspirational core value is. And so putting it into your own words. If God first is one of your core values, that's going to have a very different meaning to you than it is for me. And so you determining what your definition is. The second piece, based on the action, is what's the measurable that you're going to check in with on a daily basis. And so one of my core values is God first. And so the definition is I'm going to live my life by a biblical standard, putting God as a priority in all things I do across my faith, fitness, family, and finances. He gets the first 10%. From a measurable, I can ask myself, did I put God first in my conversation? Was I bold? Did I have an opportunity to pray for somebody throughout the day? Did I tithe with my first 10%? Did I read scripture this morning? Did I serve as I said I was going to? So I've got an actual measurable that allows me to integrate that as a core value.
I love that, man. I love how you take not just the current, but the aspirational.
Hmm.
You know, and the vision that's associated with that. Do you think most people get tripped up on that? Meaning, you know, they take what the current is and they're like, well, you know, this is my current state, and
This
they're
is
not
where I
really
am.
thinking about future state.
Yeah. I obviously, we're living
Yeah,
in a world right now where diabetes, debt, obesity, divorce rate is running rampant. All of those are symptoms of choosing pleasure over purpose. When you have a vision, you see the obstacle and the roadblock, you're like, I'm just going to keep pushing through, and I know what the outcome is that I want, and I'm not going to quit. The reason I think that we're in the state that we're in, our school systems are a mess, our politics are a mess, is because everybody is choosing that fast, easy dopamine hit rather than choosing purposeful purpose.
yeah. So let me run a situation by you, because I'm sure you get this only every now and again. But so and this is like my own, like my wife's family, right? And God bless them, man. I love my wife's family. Like my mother-in-law is the most amazing woman on the planet. My father-in-law is great. I have two brother-in-laws, and we bust each other's chops, right? But they're, you know, when we have get-togethers and stuff like that, like I'll bring my own food, and they'll be like, "Come on, man!" Like I've known them for 28 years. They're like, "Come on, dude! Like live a little." And I'm like, "I am." And I'm like, if I ate like hot dogs and Doritos, I'm gonna feel like dirt tomorrow. Like I'm
Yeah,
not gonna eat that. Like I actually won't eat that. Like my kids, like they'll be like, "Oh, let's go to McDonald's." I'm like, "No, we're not doing McDonald's. Like
yeah,
I'll
that's
just
good.
feed you rat poison if that's what you want, right?" But like I refuse to eat like that. And but here's the thing: people are like, just live a little. Life is short. Why do you do
Yeah,
stuff like that? And the funny thing is like to them, I think it's like it's easier or more enjoyable. But
mhm,
and maybe for a minute, like because I was overweight myself, and I used to find comfort and pleasure in those things, but then like started eating clean like years and years ago, and I lost weight, and I was like, oh my gosh, this feels
yeah,
so much more comfortable, so much better than that. But I think you get around people or even family members, and they're like, just live a little. Why are you so disciplined, right?
yeah.
What do you say to people like that?
I haven't been in a conversation like that in a while, and maybe it's because I keep that boundary up, where I just don't negotiate with it. And I also eat still like a fat kid sometimes, and so I'll be truthfully honest. It's like I enjoy pastries and
Still
baked
get the
goods.
donuts.
Oh man, yeah, I try to stay away from donuts. That's like my cocaine. But um, I think that the reason why that happens is they don't know what real health feels like, right?
Yeah.
If you've only eaten at a three-star restaurant your whole life, and your experience of like great fine dining is a three-star restaurant, that's just going to be your paradigm. But once you taste what a five-star restaurant is like and what the food is like and the service is like and what it feels like actually waking up in the morning and not feeling slow and sluggish and following through on the promises you made to yourself and compete, whatever your five-star restaurant life is, once you experience that, why would I want to go back to a
You don't
three-star
want to go
restaurant?
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the conversation is, try my restaurant, right? Try my restaurant for a week and just try it and see if it doesn't shift your mind. You can always go back to the three-star restaurant and Doritos and hot dogs and everything else, but try this and just see if it gives you more. And so I think that might be a tool for it. But I think my experience is that most people have no idea what actual health, fulfillment, joy, happiness, gratitude feels like because they just choose not to live in it.
But the feedback and the pushback is, but you're so strict.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many boundaries. There's so much. Just live a little, right? And
Yeah.
it's to be honest. I mean, if you've quote unquote lived a little, which we all have, right?
Uh-huh.
There's that part of you, right, that wants to order the donuts at
Sure.
midnight, right? Um, but yeah, it's like once you've tasted the 5 star, I think quality of life, it is difficult to go back. Talk to me about resilience
Mm.
when it comes to doing everything that we've talked about for the past 36 minutes. Resilience. What I notice is that when obstacles come my way and I'm doing all the things that we've talked about doing, right? Eating right, putting my faith first. I'm in my routine. I'm in my vision. I'm abiding by my core values. And if I go outside of those, what I find is stress becomes way worse,
Hmm.
right? Obstacles become quote unquote impossible now.
Yeah.
I become more irritable with my kids. I become more
Yeah.
irritable with my team, right? And that is not the person that I want to be.
Yeah.
But talk to me about resilience and what it means to live within those core values, that vision, that discipline, and how we can overcome obstacles and stress.
Yeah. I ran a 100-mile ultra marathon last year. It was
Dang, bro.
it was awesome to like have it done. It was brutal. My body hurt for like a week after. It was tough. It was challenging, and the only way I got through it was through resilience. It was realizing that I did put in the time and training for it, but it was also such a reminder that as a man, it's never going to get easy. And I think when I adopted that mindset maybe 6 years ago when I was really integrated. About 10 years ago, I was like became aware that it's not meant to get easy for us guys. It's never meant to be easy. And so when you adopt that mindset, resilience just becomes almost a core value, who you are. Like you just realize the hard path is always the easier path in the long run. If it's difficult, if it's challenging, do it that way first and watch how much freedom it provides you. And so when I think about resilience, it's first understanding and really owning the belief that it's not meant to be easy. Nothing about a man's life should be easy. Nothing. And if you think any differently on that, then you're going to have a very difficult, challenging, comfort-based life, lack fulfillment and purpose. I think the first step is realizing that as a man, it's not meant to be easy. And so resilience just becomes one of those things where you just do the thing because that's what we're called to do.
Even hearing that statement, it's not meant to be easy because I think a lot of us will get kind of tripped up and be like, "Why is it got to be so hard?"
Yeah.
Right, and then we get resentful
Yep.
over it. But just knowing that out of the gate, like, hey, it's not supposed to be easy. It
Yeah.
just isn't.
I
Um,
think that's one of those things that, the nice guy listeners, if you were raised by a mom and you're raised by a woman, part of that belief system that was given to you, not having a father's intercession, is that idea that someday there's going to be paradise. Someday it is going to be easy. Someday someone's going to be coming in that knight on shining armor that's just going to make your life like better. And that is very much the feminine voice. And that is a beautiful thing for women to hold because our job as men is to make their life easier, more comfortable, and lift the burden, carry the weight. So I think a lot of guys, and I know this from my experience, is when I had that mindset, it's supposed to be easy. There's going to be a day when I don't have to work so hard. That's my mother's voice. And so being able to identify that that is a voice that's not serving me in my masculine development was one of the biggest maturity pieces, because I realized that that voice was designed for her, not for me. And as a guy, my job is to make other people's lives easier. That is, I'm supposed to stand in the gap, be the protector, be the provider, work hard, do the things so that other people have an easier life after me. But it's not meant to be easy for me.
Hmm. And talk to me about your faith. This one is big for you. I remember being at the Squire 2.5 years ago, and Bedros introduced you as the chaplain.
Yeah.
And but talk to me about your faith. You're a single guy, and you don't find, I don't think, many single men that faith is a huge priority to them. I think, in fact, I think it's sometimes after a man gets married and he has kids, and he's like, oh man, I'm the leader, but I'm also a spiritual leader, so I better get this house of cards in order. But for you, this is foundational. I'm curious, have you always been a faith-based person, or was this something that you discovered, not too terribly long ago?
Yeah, very new.
Very new.
Definitely not faith driven. I was raised Catholic, spent a lot of time away from the church, just didn't have a relationship. Religion was one of those things that turned me off from
Same.
the
Yeah.
idea of having a relationship, and the patriarch system, believing there's a father in heaven that cares about me, loves me, and wants the best for me. I didn't understand because I didn't have the template of a biological father to feel that. And so I was very resistant to organized religion, patriarch, and submitting or surrendering in any process. And that was the case for probably 30 years. Um, 10 years ago was the start of my personal development journey, where I had that aha moment that I'm turning into my father figures. And it was a very feeble first cry for help. I just said, God, if there's a God out there, like, please help me. And then in that season, I had two books showed up in my life. One is No More Mr. Nice Guy. The other one is Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Both those books gave me insight that I was the problem of every single problem in my life. Over the last 10 years, I have been pursuing a relationship with God, but I've been looking in every single direction other than Christianity until the last three. And so, all the spiritual check boxes, Buddhism, Zen, looked into Judaism, just trying to search and really seek a relationship. And after Project Class 5, we had a gentleman die in one of our classes. And so,
Heard about that. Yeah.
yeah, it was intense, because our vision behind that obviously was to bring men together and help give them the breakthroughs and deepen their relationship with community and tribe. And that was something that we all thought that could happen, based on just the violence and the intensity of it. But none of us were really ready for it. And it was at that point that I realized that on this path, like, while I'm here on earth, I'm not only a steward for fitness and relationship, but I need to be really thinking about, like, the afterlife, and what does that look like, and how can I start really serving the soul of man, not just men in general. And so in that season, I doubled down on really looking for a good template to model. And the last gal I was dating, Christian, she introduced me actually to the church that I'm involved with out here, and I saw the template modeled with other men. And so that's why tribe is so important to me, is when you see another man walk out and live out and actually embody what Christ was all about. I think about Christianity, that being a religion that can turn people away from the relationship, and the relationship is ultimately what we're all searching for. And so seeing other men model healthy empathy, compassion, love, like showing up in such a way that Christ did, it gave me the blueprint that I didn't have growing up. And that's where I doubled down on just really understanding what it meant to be a godly man. And then I think about what I didn't have growing up and what Jesus modeled. He was the perfect man. He modeled service and sacrifice, being bold, courageous, convicted violence. We think about when he turned over all of the tables inside of the temple, and it just rushed people out of that building. Like, there's a need and there's a time to be violent in such a way that you drive home a point. And this was like the perfect man. It's like, man, I've been looking for a model my whole life, and he's been right there in the Bible. And so the last 3 years have been hyper focused on realizing that there's already a blueprint, there's a template. And what I'm searching for, what I have been searching for, is laid out in the life of Jesus.
Hmm. Brother, I think you covered like the big categories that men are so curious about, family, fitness. I know we brushed over finances, a little bit of faith was a big element. For men who want to connect with you and just follow you and follow your content and what you're all about, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram, the Fitbeard. Got an email list you can drop in. I drop a weekly newsletter on masculinity and the four F's: faith, fitness, family, and finances. And yeah, I'd love to connect with the guys on the journey.
You bet. Well, guys, you're not going to have to look far for Aaron. I mean, obviously, all you have to do is really Google the Fitbeard, and I think he will probably just pop right up. But we'll have all the links in the show notes for you as far as the things that we covered today and as well as his links as well. Just go to thedadedge.com/475 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/475. We'll also have a coupon code in there for if you buy 11 donuts, you get one for free.
Boom.
Just use coupon code Aaron upon checkout. Oh man, we're gonna, dude. It was so good having you on the show. Thank you for coming and sharing just all the imperfections, all the things that are not on the highlight reel, right? All the real things, and you've given us some amazing things to think about. Thank you for sharing things on vision, core values, faith, and fitness, and just really appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Grateful to be here.